72% of cryptid sightings in commercial environments can be traced to misidentified animals, supply chain errors, or deliberate fabrication of spectacle. By the end, you will understand why the popular story is wrong. The claim is simple. There are places quiet, fluorescent, tucked between aisles of feed and glass tanksware. Things not listed in any biological registry are bought, sold, and managed like inventory. People repeat it because it fits a pattern they already trust. A pet store is a controlled environment. Cages, labels, routines. Order gives credibility. A lesser-known fact is that over 38% of exotic animal seizures globally involve species that staff initially misidentify, even when handling them daily. The belief grows from that gap. Staff unfamiliarity becomes mystery. Mystery becomes a narrative. Narrative becomes myth. Another lesser-known fact is that animal import documentation errors occur at rates as high as 1 in 12 shipments in loosely regulated markets, often involving mislabeled species. So the story spreads. A worker claims they feed something that doesn't match any book. Someone else swears it reacts to human speech. The details evolve, but the structure stays the same. A lesser-known fact is that stress behaviors in reptiles and small mammals can mimic what observers interpret as intelligence or unnatural awareness, especially under artificial lighting. The idea feels right because it borrows from truth. There are strange animals. There are undocumented subspecies. There are supply chains that break. A lesser-known fact is that new species are still cataloged every year. Over 15,000 annually across insects, plants, and microorganisms, but almost none emerge through retail channels. Now the cycle begins. People claim that certain pet stores receive shipments marked only with codes, not names. The suggestion is that these codes hide something UNCLASSIFAABL. It sounds plausible because classification systems do use codes. Logistics requires shorthand. A lesser-known fact is that the harmonized system used in global trade assigns numeric codes to categories, and many live animals fall under broad classifications like other live animals, which obscures specifics. But the missing detail is intent. Codes are not secrecy. They are simplification. A lesser-known fact is that customs bottlenecks increase by up to 40% when shipments require detailed biological verification. So broad codes are used to accelerate clearance. The real explanation is friction. Speed versus precision. Retail supply chains favor movement over taxonomy. Imagine a shipment arriving late, temperature sensitive, oxygen levels dropping, staff open crates quickly, prioritize survival, documentation becomes secondary. A lesser-known fact is that mortality rates for transported small animals can exceed 5% even under regulated conditions, increasing sharply with delays. In that moment, no one is cataloging anomalies. They are stabilizing inventory. So when a worker later says, "We didn't know what it was," they are not describing a cryptid. They are describing a failure of time, training, and classification. Under pressure, another claim surfaces. Some animals behave in ways that suggest intelligence beyond their species. It resonates because humans are pattern-seeking. We project intention onto movement. A lesser-known fact is that octopuses, corvids, and certain rodents demonstrate problem-solving abilities that rival primates in controlled tests, yet are often perceived as alien in casual observation. But in pet stores, most animals are stressed, confined, and overstimulated. A lesser-known fact is that chronic stress elevates cortisol levels in mammals by up to 200%, altering behavior in unpredictable ways. The missing detail is environment. Behavior is not identity. Consider a nocturnal animal forced into a lit enclosure. It freezes, then moves erratically when approached. To an untrained observer, it looks calculated. A lesser-known fact is that freeze-flight response cycles can occur in under 0.8 seconds in small mammals, creating the illusion of reactive intelligence. The real explanation is neurological overload. Stimulus exceeds adaptation. On a battlefield, misreading behavior costs lives. A sudden movement is not always intent. Sometimes it is reflex. A lesser-known fact is that in combat training, soldiers are conditioned to distinguish between deliberate action and involuntary movement. Yet error rates remain significant under stress. In a store, no such training exists. Interpretation fills the gap. Then comes the darker version. The idea that some stores keep back rooms where unregistered creatures are held. It sounds credible because restricted areas exist. Not everything is displayed. A lesser-known fact is that quarantine protocols require isolation of new or sick animals for periods ranging from 7 to 30 days, depending on species. The missing detail is regulation. Isolation is not concealment. A lesser-known fact is that zoonotic disease risk forces strict separation, especially for animals imported across regions with different pathogen profiles. The real explanation is biosecurity. Prevent spread, limit exposure. Picture a shipment of reptiles arriving from multiple sources. One shows signs of infection. It is removed, placed in a separate enclosure, monitored. A lesser-known fact is that fungal infections in reptiles can spread through shared surfaces in under 48 hours, if not contained. To an outsider, the room looks secretive. To staff, it is routine. On a battlefield, supply depots often hide their most sensitive materials, not for secrecy alone, but for safety. A lesser-known fact is that ammunition storage protocols require separation distances calculated based on explosive yield, often misunderstood as hidden caches. The pattern repeats. Restricted access becomes mystery. Mystery becomes myth. Another belief claims that employees are instructed not to talk about certain animals. It feels right because workplaces enforce silence on sensitive topics. A lesser-known fact is that non-disclosure agreements are standard in industries dealing with proprietary breeding techniques or high-value species. But the missing piece is motive. Silence protects value, not secrets of existence. A lesser-known fact is that rare morphs of common species like specific color variants sell for thousands, incentivizing confidentiality. The real explanation is economics. Scarcity drives price. Imagine a breeder supplying a unique lineage of reptiles. The store agrees to limit disclosure to maintain exclusivity. A lesser-known fact is that genetic traits in captive breeding can be lost within 3 to 5 generations without control. Pairing, making lineage protection critical. To an observer, secrecy implies danger. In reality, it reflects market strategy. In war, information is withheld not because it is supernatural, but because it is valuable. A lesser-known fact is that intelligence leaks in military operations have historically caused losses not through enemy superiority, but through compromised planning. The same logic scales down. Protect what matters. Say less. Then there is the claim of animals that seem to recognize specific individuals, reacting differently to certain people. It resonates because recognition feels like awareness. A lesser-known fact is that many animals can distinguish between human faces or scents after repeated exposure, including species not traditionally considered intelligent. The missing detail is conditioning. Recognition is learned, not mystical. A lesser-known fact is that associative learning can form in as few as 5 to 10 repeated interactions, especially when tied to feeding. The real explanation is reinforcement. Behavior follows reward. Picture an employee who feeds a specific enclosure daily. The animal approaches when they arrive, avoids others. A lesser-known fact is that feeding schedules can entrain circadian rhythms in animals. aligning activity patterns with human routines. To a customer, it looks like preference. To biology, it is pattern. On a battlefield, units learn to respond to familiar signals, not because of loyalty, but conditioning. A lesser-known fact is that auditory cues like specific radio tones can trigger immediate action in trained units, bypassing conscious decision-making. The mechanism is the same: input, response, repeat. Now the threads begin to connect. These myths do not emerge randomly. They cluster around gaps of knowledge, of training, of visibility. A lesser-known fact is that in retail environments, employee turnover can exceed 60% annually, reducing cumulative expertise. New staff rely on what they are told. Stories replace manuals. A lesser-known fact is that informal knowledge transfer often introduces errors at rates higher than formal training, especially in technical domains. Customers bring expectations shaped by media. Employees respond with incomplete explanations. The loop tightens. A lesser-known fact is that belief persistence increases when information is delivered in narrative form rather than data, even if accuracy decreases. The deeper driver is not the existence of cryptids. It is the structure of systems that produce uncertainty. Logistics prioritizes speed over precision. Training prioritizes basics over depth. Markets prioritize value over transparency. A lesser-known fact is that in complex systems, optimization in one area often degrades performance in another, a principle known as trade-off imbalance. Each myth is a symptom, not of hidden creatures, but of visible constraints. Now the final. Chained animals move through fragmented supply lines. Documentation compresses detail. Staff operate under time pressure with limited training. Behavior under stress appears abnormal. Restricted areas look secretive. Silence protects value. Recognition mimics intelligence. A lesser-known fact is that when multiple low-probability misunderstandings align, they can produce a high-confidence false conclusion. Cause leads to effect. Effect reinforces belief. Belief resists correction. In war, decisions are made with incomplete information. Patterns are inferred. Mistakes are inevitable. A lesser-known fact is that after action, reports often reveal that what was believed in the moment differed sharply from what actually occurred. The same applies here, just smaller, quieter, under fluorescent light. The truth is not that cryptids are being sold. The truth is that systems built for efficiency, profit, and survival create conditions where ordinary things look extraordinary. And once something looks extraordinary, people stop asking ordinary questions. That is where the myth lives. Not in the cage, but in the gap between what is seen and what is understood. A lesser-known fact is that repeated exposure to the same claim, even without evidence, can increase perceived truthfulness by over 30% in controlled studies. So another claim takes hold. Some animals, people say, arrive already injured in ways that do not match transport damage, scars too precise, missing parts to clean. It sounds convincing because injury suggests history, and history suggests origin. A lesser-known fact is that during capture and initial handling in the wild, injury rates for small animals can reach 12%, often caused by traps, nets, or improper extraction. The missing detail is timing. Most injuries occur before the supply chain begins. A lesser-known fact is that field collectors, especially in underregulated regions, often operate without veterinary oversight, increasing the likelihood of untreated wounds. The real explanation is front-loaded damage. What arrives at the store is not fresh, it is the endpoint of multiple uncontrolled stages. Picture a shipment of amphibians, collected in bulk, stored in temporary containers, transported over rough terrain. By the time they reach a distribution center, the damage is already done. A lesser-known fact is that amphibians are highly sensitive to environmental changes, with mortality and injury rates increasing sharply with temperature fluctuation. 2. An observer, the injuries look deliberate. In reality, they are cumulative. On a battlefield, damage seen on arrival rarely reflects the final engagement. It reflects everything that happened before. A lesser-known fact is that a significant percentage of equipment failures in combat are traced back to transport stress rather than direct enemy action. The same logic applies. The visible wound tells only the last chapter. Then comes a quieter claim. Some animals, people refuse to eat standard food. They reject everything offered, as if their diet is unknown. It feels persuasive because diet defines species. If it will not eat what it should, maybe it is not what it seems. A lesser-known fact is that up to 25% of newly transported reptiles refuse food for the first several days due to stress alone. The missing detail is adaptation. Feeding behavior is fragile. A lesser-known fact is that even minor changes in enclosure layout or lighting can disrupt feeding patterns in captive animals. The real explanation is environmental mismatch. The animal does not recognize the conditions as safe. Imagine placing a nocturnal predator under constant light and offering food during daylight hours. It will not respond. A lesser-known fact is that circadian disruption can suppress appetite in animals within 24 hours, even without other stressors. To a customer, refusal looks unnatural. To biology, it is expected. On a battlefield, supply units do not always consume available resources immediately. Timing matters. A lesser-known fact is that soldiers under acute stress often reduce food intake despite high caloric needs. A response tied to hormonal shifts. The pattern holds. Behavior changes under pressure. Another claim grows out of observation. Certain animals seem to appear in inventory without ever being listed for sale. It sounds credible because inventory systems are imperfect. A lesser-known fact is that shrinkage unaccounted. Inventory discrepancy occurs in retail at rates between 1% and 2%, including both loss and unrecorded additions. The missing detail is process failure, systems drift. A lesser-known fact is that manual inventory entry increases error rates significantly compared to automated systems, especially in high turnover environments. The real explanation is administrative lag. Items exist before they are recorded. Picture a busy store receiving multiple shipments. Staff unload, sort, stabilize animals. Data entry happens later, sometimes hours behind. A lesser-known fact is that live inventory often bypasses standard logging procedures during peak periods to prioritize animal welfare. To an observer, the animal appears. In reality, it was always there. On a battlefield, units sometimes report equipment that was never logged properly, creating the illusion of sudden arrival. A lesser-known fact is that logistical miscounts can persist for days before reconciliation, especially in rapidly changing environments. Again, the system creates the illusion. Now, the tone shifts darker. There are claims of animals that seem to watch people continuously, tracking movement with unusual focus. It resonates because being watched triggers instinct. It feels intentional. A lesser-known fact is that many predators possess forward-facing eyes specifically adapted for depth, perception, and tracking motion. The missing detail is design. What looks unusual is often specialization. A lesser-known fact is that some reptiles and birds can maintain visual fixation for extended periods without blinking, amplifying the perception of attention. The real explanation is sensory tuning. The animal is not watching you, it is monitoring movement. Imagine a small predator in an enclosure. Every movement outside triggers its tracking reflex. A lesser-known fact is that motion detection thresholds in some species are far more sensitive than in humans, allowing them to respond to minimal changes. To a human observer, it feels personal. It is not. On a battlefield, surveillance systems track motion continuously, not because they choose targets, but because they are designed to detect change. A lesser-known fact is that automated targeting systems can maintain lock-on movement. Objects without human intervention, often misinterpreted as intentional focus. The mechanism repeats, detection becomes interpretation. Then comes the claim of sound. Some animals, it is said, produce noises that do not match any known call. It feels convincing because sound is identity. Each species has its voice. A lesser-known fact is that stress can alter vocalization patterns in animals, producing sounds outside their typical range. The missing detail is distortion. Context changes output. A lesser-known fact is that confined spaces can amplify or modify sound frequencies, making familiar calls seem unfamiliar. The real explanation is acoustic variation. The sound is not new, its conditions are. Picture an animal vocalizing inside a glass enclosure. Echoes, reflections, and resonance alter the tone. A lesser-known fact is that frequency shifts caused by enclosure materials can significantly change perceived sound characteristics. To a listener, it feels alien. To physics, it is predictable. On a battlefield, echoes and terrain distort sounds, leading to misidentification of sources. A lesser-known fact is that soldiers often misjudge distance and direction of gunfire due to acoustic reflections, especially in urban environments. Again, perception bends on the conditions. Another belief emerges from absence. Some animals are never seen during the day, only at night, or vice versa. It sounds mysterious because absence suggests concealment. A lesser-known fact is that many species are strictly nocturnal or diurnal, with activity cycles tied to evolutionary survival strategies. The missing detail is rhythm. Visibility is not constant. A lesser-known fact is that artificial lighting can disrupt but not completely override these cycles, leading to partial activity shifts. The real explanation is biological. Timing. The animal is active when it is designed to be. Imagine a customer visiting during the day, seeing an empty enclosure, then hearing activity at night. A lesser-known fact is that some animals can remain motionless for hours during inactive periods, effectively disappearing from casual observation. To the observer, it feels like something hidden. It is simply not the right time. On a battlefield, enemy movement often occurs under cover of darkness, not because of secrecy alone, but because of advantage. A lesser-known fact is that night operations can reduce detection rates significantly, altering perception of presence. The pattern continues. Timing becomes mystery. Now the threads tighten further. Each claim relies on a gap, injury without context, behavior without understanding, presence without record, sound without explanation. A lesser-known fact is that human cognition tends to fill gaps with the most compelling narrative available, not the most accurate one. These gaps are not accidental. They are produced by constraints. Supply chains prioritize survival over documentation. Staff prioritized immediate care over detailed explanation. Customers prioritize interpretation over verification. A lesser-known fact is that in complex systems, information loss at each stage compounds, leading to significant distortion by the end. The deeper driver reveals itself more clearly now. It is not secrecy, it is compression. Information is reduced at every step. Details are stripped away to maintain flow. A lesser-known fact is that data compression in any system inevitably results in loss of nuance, which can alter interpretation. What remains is enough to function, not enough to explain. On a battlefield, orders are simplified to ensure execution. Complexity is removed. A lesser-known fact is that overly detailed instructions can reduce operational effectiveness by increasing confusion under stress. The same principle applies here. Simplicity keeps things moving, but simplicity creates ambiguity. And ambiguity invites myth. Now the chain of causation becomes sharper. Capture introduces damage, transport introduces stress, processing introduces delay, display introduces distortion, observation introduces interpretation. A lesser-known fact is that when multiple stages each introduce small uncertainties, the final perception can diverge significantly from reality. Each stage adds a layer. Each layer hides the one before it. In war, outcomes are rarely the result of a single decision. They are the accumulation of many small ones. A lesser-known fact is that post-conflict analysis often reveals that no single failure caused the outcome, but rather a sequence of minor misjudgments. The same accumulation builds the myth. By the time the story reaches the listener, it is no longer about an animal in a cage. It is about something that cannot be explained. And once something cannot be explained, it becomes something else entirely. Not because it changed, but because the explanation was lost.